Hi guys, welcome back. We're going to cover section C of chapter 10 today. I got a friend with me. I got my buddy Pedro. He's going to hang out with us today because we're talking about vertebrates. All right. So our last phylum that we've been talking about, we talked about 8 with the invertebrates because that was 95% of the animals. We're down to the last 5% of the animals, and they are in the phylum Chordata. Okay, those are all vertebrates. The name chordata has to do with it being a chordate, and that has to do with having that notochord. Okay, but the vertebrates have a backbone, specifically a backbone made of individual vertebrae. Okay, so here are 2 human vertebrae, and what's nice that it's not just a single bone like in our leg or something. They're separated by these pads of cartilage, as it gives us a lot of flexibility. Imagine if your backbone was like your thigh bone. You'd have hardly any flexibility. And you can see that even though these animals are different shapes, they all have very similar backbones. They're all made of these individual vertebrae. You can kind of see the crocodiles over there. Let me move myself out of the way. You can see his backbone going down into his tail, made of those vertebrae. The cow, there's the neck, and then it follows along like that. Even the fish, okay? And this chicken, okay? They all have these flexible backbones made of vertebrae, all right? Ours starts up at our neck up here, travels down, our back. You can see the back of him, and it goes all the way down to our tailbone, okay? Now, the purpose of our backbones, the purpose of these vertebrae is to protect this thing that's running through the back of it. This would be sticking towards the back of your body. This is the spinal cord that runs through that. Very protected, because if your spinal cord gets injured, it affects all the nerves that are branching off of it. Okay, so very important job. All of these vertebrates are also considered endoskeletons. Okay, they have an endoskeleton, which means it's an internal skeleton. We don't see this. Okay, this guy only comes out at Halloween. The skeleton is covered with other body parts, muscles and skin and things like that. Inside, internal skeleton. All right, so let's jump in. So all of these are part of the phylum Chordata. These are different, classes and just different subsets of animals. First one are fish. Fish have gills to breathe. They do not have lungs. And most of them are ectotherms. So remember that relative complexity. As we've gone through the invertebrates, we've gotten a little more complex. Same thing through the vertebrates. We're going to get more complex. The fish are kind of the most basic, but they have organs. They've got blood, so they're way more complex than, say, a sponge. Okay, but they are ectotherms. They rely on the environment for their temperature. And they are the largest group of vertebrates. So when we think of vertebrates, most of them are actually fish. Okay, we've got 3 main types of fish. We've got what's known as the jawless fish, which is exactly what it means. Doesn't have a jaw. This funky looking guy right here is a jawless fish. That's his mouth. It doesn't open and close. It's just always open. And what that does is it just attaches to another creature. And it's kind of a parasite almost. And it just, those teeth kind of munch on the food, and it just kind of sucks the food in. Really creepy. Okay. Then we've got what's known as cartilaginous fish. Okay, that sounds like cartilage, and it's because their skeleton, it is an endoskeleton, but it's made mostly of cartilage. The skeleton is made of cartilage. Another typo. Sharks can squeeze in and out of really small openings because their skeleton is so flexible. And rays, like stingrays, with those flappy wings. Okay, those are cartilaginous fish. And then all the rest of the fish, when you think of a fish like a goldfish or Nemo or something like that, those are bony fish. They actually have a skeleton made out of bone. Okay? All right, into amphibians. So we're getting a little more complex. Okay? These are still echinoderms. Ectotherms. They still rely on the environment to control their temperature. But eventually they develop lungs. So kind of the key feature of these amphibians is they start life off in the water with gills. They don't have lungs. But then they go through this process known as metamorphosis, okay? So if you think of a frog tadpole, it looks very different than the adult frog, okay? Starts in the water. As it develops, it grows legs, it grows lungs, and it actually moves out to the land where it can breathe air through its lungs, okay? The main groups of amphibians are the frogs and the toads. And their kind of main characteristics are those strong hind legs that allows them to jump places. And salamanders. Salamanders are kind of a wet version of a lizard. Their skin is very moist, and they need to live near water just because they need a very wet environment to keep their skin wet. Okay. Then we get into reptiles. Speaking of lizards, still ectotherms, still need the environment to control their temperature. They have very dry, scaly skin, and most reptiles lay eggs. Okay, we've got snakes and lizards as one of the groups, and it's actually the second largest groups of vertebrates. They're notorious. Their characteristics that they're known for is that they molt their skin, and they have movable upper jaws. So we have only a movable lower jaw. Okay, but with the snakes and lizards, both parts are movable, and that's what allows snakes to eat things that are way bigger than them because they can open their mouths so wide. We've got the crocodiles and alligators as another group of reptiles. They have a 4-chambered heart. Most of the animals we talked about before that have had hearts only have 3 chambers or only 2 chambers. But the crocodiles have a 4-chambered heart, which we'll talk a lot about when we get to the human heart. It's just the best version of the heart. It's the most complex, okay? They both care for their young, which is kind of unique in the animal kingdom. A lot of animals have young and then ditch them. They're on their own. But both crocodiles and alligators stick around and they take care of their babies, okay? Now, the way you can tell the difference between a crocodile and an alligator is an alligator has a snout that's very broad, whereas a crocodile's kind of comes in like that, and it's very narrow, and you can see the teeth kind of poking out. I'd stay away from either one of them. They're both dangerous, okay? And then finally, that brings us to our turtles. The turtles have a hard shell that covers their body, and it's actually kind of part of their skeleton here. Doesn't mean they have an exoskeleton. They still have an internal skeleton. Their skull, their vertebrae, their appendages, that's all still an endoskeleton that's inside, okay? But that shell covers the kind of the top and the bottom of their body. And that's turtles. They also lay eggs. All right, birds. Birds are vertebrates. They are endothermic now. Now that means they don't need to rely on the environment. They can maintain their own body temperature. They've got some unique features. They've got wings. Their bodies are covered with feathers, and a lot of those features are specific to assisting in flight. Okay. The feathers, the wings, they have a hollow skeleton. So they still have bones. They still have an endoskeleton, but the bones are hollow to make them lighter. They have these air sacs inside. So this picture doesn't show it, but they have almost like these kind of balloon-shaped thing in their bodies, and they fill it with air, and it gives them extra air because they process so much oxygen because they burn so much with their flying. They have really strong chest muscles, okay? So when you eat a chicken breast, that's the chest muscle. When they flap their wings, those muscles are what allow them to flap their wings, okay? Some other unique features of birds, they lay eggs, which isn't super unique because reptiles lay eggs as well and fish lay eggs. But their beak is actually part of their skull. So this beak that they eat with is actually part of the skull. It's very strong. It allows them to break into their food, okay? All right, finally, we're to mammals, okay? This is a lot of different pictures here of lots of different types of mammals, and it very intentionally includes people. People are animals. We are mammals, okay? Mammals are the most complex of the animals. They are endothermic. They can maintain their own body temperature. But they produce milk for their young. So the word mammal comes from the mammary glands, which is where the milk is produced to feed their young. And at some point in their life, all mammals have hair, even sea mammals like whales and dolphins, okay? They have whiskers when they're young. We've got 3 main groups of mammals. We have the monotremes, which lay eggs still. They don't have live birth, they lay eggs. There's only a couple of those, like the spiny anteater and the duck-billed platypus. This guy right here is the duck-billed platypus. So he lays eggs. Then we've got marsupials. Those are our koalas and opossums and kangaroos. Actually, I don't know if koalas are. I think they are. Marsupials have live birth, but the baby is born before it's fully developed. It's very pink, it's very weak, it's blind, still really needs to grow and develop more. And so what the baby does after it's born is it crawls into a pouch and it continues developing. And it's feeding during that time. It's getting that mother's milk, but it's not able to survive yet outside of that pouch, okay? And then the third most complex type, which we're a part of, are known as placental mammals. And that's because they have a placenta. And this is an organ that we'll talk more about when we talk about the reproductive system. But it's basically the organ that passes the nutrients and the oxygen from the mother to the baby. So when the baby is in the mother's womb, in the uterus, it's getting food, it's getting nutrients from the mother. Anything the mother eats is digested and it's shared with the baby. And that's how the baby can grow. Placental mammals are born able to survive outside of the womb. Okay, if the pregnancy has gone long enough, they're able to survive, kind of fully developed. Now that doesn't mean they're ready to be independent. Certainly, human babies are very dependent upon help. They can't get food themselves, but they can survive outside of the womb now. Okay, I think that's all. It is. Phew, that was a long one. All right, mammals.